Yesterday I was up here and I spoke about invalid traffic. So I'm not going to concentrate on that topic. We're talking about viewable impressions in this panel. We're doing tons of work in both of those areas. And you might remember this slide from yesterday. This is a picture of our overall path that we're on in terms of standardizing, validating digital measurement and making it more comparable to other legacy media types. Started with a served impression where we were prior to June 2014, where we were trading on served impressions. Under that, you see MRC wrote a ton of guidelines about how to do that, starting about 15 years ago, how to measure a served impression. So essentially, the problem that we're trying to correct now with viewable impressions, I created 15 years ago by writing the served impression standard. That tech didn't exist to measure viewability, but you can see we've written a ton of standards. Our current state is implementing viewability in the US and implementing the intense invalid traffic standards that I spoke about yesterday. But the important thing, there's a lot of misinformation out there about viewability. It's not about measuring engagement. Even on the last panel, there was discussion about what's the meaning of viewability. It's worthless to determine, for a marketer to determine brand engagement. Well, it's not intended for that. This third stage is where we're going to do that. We're going to create a viewable impression to a human, so free of invalid traffic, delineated on the basis of duration within audience targeting groups. So that's essentially an audience-based currency. That's what we're writing right now, and that's moving us to the next level about doing what the marketers want, which is in determining the value of advertising, which is the last stage of the framework. And a lot of that is in flight right now at MRC. To give you an update on viewable impressions, you probably recall that we enacted a viewable impression standard in the United States in 2014, and we updated it after some extensive vendor reconciliation processes in August of 2015, and it has the 50% of pixel standard with 1 second for display and 2 seconds for video. After the August 2015 process, we also baked into the standards very extensive reconciliation abatement measures. We're now working on a permanent mobile viewability standard, and we just released that document a couple of weeks ago for public comment. One key thing to understand is that there are some open matters in that guideline right now. There are two notable ones. One is how mobile viewability will work in a news feed environment, or an environment where you're continuously scrolling in a different orientation from a web page up and down in what is essentially an unlimited web page. If you've been on Facebook or newsfeed type environments, you're probably familiar with that. It's not a given how viewability necessarily occurs in that environment. Now, we've done a lot of study, and it looks like it might be similar, but we still are reserving judgment to possibly change that standard in the next few weeks based on some data that we're getting. And we're also studying the impact of polling frequency, which impacts battery life and communication for mobile in doing those standards. I want to share some data points with you related to our learnings in mobile. We've analyzed about 1 billion impressions, more than that actually, from accredited or in-process measurement sources. We've also analyzed a bunch of other impressions from other sources and even some survey-based research, for example, eye tracking, things like that. One thing that we learned is that these data sets are highly varied, so it's clear that standardization is really necessary in the mobile environment for viewability. Our pure newsfeed data in all those impressions I just mentioned was somewhat limited. There is newsfeed data buried in there, but one of the reasons why there's an open item is because we're looking to get more pure data on newsfeed. Rendering is critical. So first observation, it takes about, on average in our data, about 5 seconds for a mobile ad to render. So if you're starting to measure viewability before the render, you're making a mistake. We're going to be setting a standard which requires the ad to render in mobile before we even start a viewability decision. Interestingly enough, the rest of the data looked very similar to desktop. There was a nice inflection in the curve around 1.5 seconds for display and around between 2 and 3 seconds for video, which needs to be discounted back because we're tracking these inflections based on user interaction. That's past the opportunity to see, so we have to discount it back to reflect the opportunity to see. We did note some faster interactions occasionally in video, but that was less than 1% of the time. A couple other observations. 80% of in-app ads actually rendered. So that means 20% of in-app ads never rendered. And out of that, approximately 80% became viewable. That's different in mobile web, where about 74% of ads rendered and only 50 to 60% became viewable using the desktop criteria. So the the mobile web environment is a lot less controlled and has a harder position to start with for viewability. Totally out of view ads were substantially higher in mobile web, which were about 20%, than in-app ads, which were about 10%. So those are ads that never became viewable. We haven't yet developed minimum measured rate specifications. We're still working on that. I mentioned this audience currency project, essentially that third arrow over. That's going to be a very difficult project. Think about what we have to do in digital to make things viewable, to free it from invalid traffic, determine the role of duration, audience attribution, things like that. We also have a lot of work to do in legacy media. In the US, for example, we don't measure discrete commercial ratings. So how can you put that apples to apples with what we're developing in digital? So there has to be a lot of changes. We have to account for duplication and do a lot of work in data attribution, which is very difficult. This is my contact information. Happy to speak to anyone who has questions about viewability and look forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much, George.